Imagine, a normal day, a noisy street, cars rushing about their business, when suddenly something incredible happens. A young girl notices that an elderly woman was under one of the cars. Everyone passes by, but she decides to act. What would you do in her place? This is a story about an incredible courage that turned her life around forever. Watch on to find out how her act changed fate. Where do you watch this video from? Write in the comments. It's always interesting to find out where our viewers are. The girl, whose name was Mia, was just walking home from school when she heard a strange noise, cries for help that no one seemed to notice. The people around them continued their business as if nothing was happening. But Mia felt something strange in her chest, an inner voice that wouldn't let her pass it by. As she approached the scene of the accident, her heart skipped a beat. An elderly woman was under the car, who was pinned down by a heavy car. She stared helplessly at the sky, her hands moving weakly. A crowd of people gathered around, but no one dared to come any closer. Some of them filmed what was happening on their phones, some called an ambulance, but time passed, and the woman remained in danger. Mia knew the minutes counted. She wasn't a superhero, didn't have any special powers, but in that moment, she realized that it was up to her to act. Thoughts flashed through my head. What if I don't make it? What if I just make it worse? But deep down, Mia felt that she should give it a try. Almost without thinking, she ran to the car. People around her looked at her in surprise, and someone even shouted, "Stay out of it, it's dangerous." But fear receded before a sense of responsibility. Mia knelt down next to the car and carefully began lifting it with the jack that was suddenly at hand. Her hands were shaking with the effort, but the adrenaline was pushing her forward. Everything seemed to slow down. With each passing second, the pressure on the girl's shoulders increased not only physically, but also mentally. She didn't know if she could hold on to the car long enough for someone to help pull the woman out. The thought kept running through my head, I can't leave her now. But suddenly, with unexpected ease, the car lifted enough for the others to pull the elderly woman out from under it. When the woman was finally rescued, Mia realized that her legs were weak with fatigue, and her heart was still pounding loudly in her chest. There was a round of applause, and someone was thanking her, but Mia herself was in shock. She didn't even realize that she had just done something incredible, but that was only the beginning of her story. The next day, her act spread on social networks. The video of her saving a life has garnered thousands of views, and people have started calling her a hero. But that wasn't the case for Mia at all. She didn't need fame or recognition. She just did what she thought was right. However, the world could no longer remain indifferent. What happened next changed her life forever. After Mia saved the elderly woman, it seemed that everything was finally over. The adrenaline was starting to subside, people were thanking her, and the ambulance sirens were getting closer. The woman was quickly taken to the hospital, and Mia was relieved. That evening, she returned home exhausted both physically and emotionally. It all happened so fast that she barely had time to process what she'd actually done. The next day, when she opened her eyes, she never imagined that her life would change so much. When Mia went online, she was shocked. Her feat was caught on video, and it instantly spread on social networks. Comments with thanks, admiration, and words of support filled her phone. But among the thousands of kind words, there was something that confused her. One of the comments was particularly strange. "Are you sure this was a rescue?" Sometimes a good intention can have dark consequences. Mia didn't think much of it, thinking it was just trolling, but soon she noticed that strange things were happening to her. First, she received an anonymous letter in her school locker. It said, "You shouldn't have done that." Mia felt a chill run down her spine, but she tried to shrug off the strange threat. A few days later, as she was walking home, the girl noticed that someone was following her. The stranger was in the shadows, and his face wasn't visible, but the sensation was unsettling. Mia quickened her pace, feeling cold sweat trickle down her back. Whoever it was had been following her for days on end. She began to feel that her every move was being controlled. And then came the moment that changed everything. One evening, she received a call from an unknown number. An elderly woman's voice came from the other end of the line, but it sounded strange and distant, as if it came from a distant past. "You saved me, but now everything has changed. You don't know anything about that car, or why I was there," the voice said. Mia felt her heart skip a beat. How could this woman know her phone number? And what did she mean by that? The questions became too many, and the girl began to investigate what really happened on that fateful day. She went to the hospital to visit the elderly woman she had saved, but when she got to the room, she was met with something completely unexpected. The bed was empty, and the nurse said that the woman was discharged the day after the accident. But how could she have checked out so quickly? Her injuries seemed serious. Fear began to take hold of Mia, but she knew one thing: she couldn't just let it go. In search of answers, she went to the scene of the accident to talk to people who witnessed the events. There, she met a man who was standing nearby and watching her curiously. When Mia came up to him, he asked, "You're Mia, right? The one who saved that woman. Do you know who she really is?" Mia froze. This man knew something she didn't. With a heavy heart, she replied that she had no idea. The man took a slow breath and looked her straight in the eye. "She's not just a random victim. A lot more happened that night than you think. This car, she didn't just hit it. She tried to stop her. But you intervened. And now the consequences will be severe." Mia realized that her action wasn't as simple as it seemed. The woman she'd saved might have been part of something darker and more dangerous. And now Mia is caught up in this dangerous game where her every move is being watched. She realized that her act, which had seemed heroic, had opened the door to a world she hadn't known existed. A world full of secrets, dangers and hidden enemies. Mia stood rooted to the spot, feeling the ground give way beneath her feet. The man she was talking to seemed oddly calm, almost too calm for someone who knew such shocking things. She couldn't quite comprehend. Was her heroic act connected to something dark and dangerous? But on the other hand, the mysterious phone calls, the surveillance, all indicated that the story she thought was over was just beginning. "What do you mean? What kind of car tried to stop her?" Mia managed to say, suppressing her fear. The man averted his eyes, as if weighing whether to say more. Finally, he said softly, "You didn't just save an elderly woman. Her name is Marion Dale. She's been on the run for years. Some consider it dangerous. She'd stolen something valuable that might change the course of events, and not just in her life." Mia held her breath, feeling a growing sense of panic. "That car," the man continued, "wasn't an accident. They knew she was going to be there, and they wanted to stop her. Your boldness ruined this plan." Mia suddenly realized that the accident, the moment when she had decided to save Marion, had been the key moment. Everything looked different now. It wasn't just an accident, it was a hunt, and maybe her helping the old lady was a mistake. "So what do I do now? What is it?" she asked shakily, her heart pounding in her chest. The man looked around as if he was afraid that they were being followed, and said in a low voice, "The only way to find out the truth is to meet her again. Marion slipped out of the hospital, but I know where to find her. If you want answers, you need to come with me." Mia hesitated. It was dangerous. Too dangerous for the average schoolgirl she thought she was, but part of her couldn't just let it go. Her intervention had changed not only Marion's life, but now her own. Knowing there was no turning back, Mia agreed. They went to the outskirts of the city, to the old abandoned house where, according to the man, Marion was hiding. The house looked eerie, dilapidated walls, dirty windows, and a dead silence all around. Mia's heart was pounding. They climbed the creaking stairs and the man knocked on the door. The door opened softly, and the same woman, Marion Dale, stood in the doorway. She looked exhausted and weary, but there was a twinkle in her eyes, as if she was waiting for them. Mia steeled herself and stepped forward. "Why did you call me?" Mia asked, trying to sound confident. Marion, looking them over in silence, finally spoke. "I called to warn you. It wasn't an accident that you intervened that day. Now they know about you." "They? Who is it?" Mia asked, feeling the mystery thicken. Marion shook her head. These are people who have been looking for me for many years. I've learned a secret that they don't want to be known. I thought they were going to catch me when I got hit by a car, but you saved me. They're on your trail now. You're caught up in a game where the stakes are much higher than you can imagine. Mia felt a cold chill run through her body. The questions in her head snowballed. What's the secret? Why is it so important? And what would happen to her now? Marion, as if reading her mind, said, "You need to run, Mia. Find people who can help. I know how to protect you, but we need to get out of here as soon as possible. Time is running out." Before Mia could reply, the sound of engines could be heard in the distance. The man abruptly turned to the window, his face contorted with alarm. "They're here." Marion pushed Mia toward the back door. "We need to leave. Now." Mia took one last look at the door where footsteps were coming from. It all seemed unreal, like something out of a movie, but she knew that her life would never be the same again. She ran without looking back, realizing that this world full of secrets and dangers was now her reality. Mia ran through the dark alley, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it was going to burst out of her chest. Marion and the strange man who had brought her here were somewhere behind her, and I could still hear them saying, "They're coming for you." Who are these people who are trying to stop the woman she saved? And why are they so dangerous? But of all the questions, the one that tormented her the most was how she got caught up in this. Around the corner, she slowed, catching her breath and leaning against the cold brick wall. My head was buzzing and my thoughts were all mixed up, but she soon felt that it wasn't just fear that was haunting her. It was something else. From the very beginning, when her face appeared on the news, she noticed strange comments and stares on the street. There was admiration and gratitude, but there were also those who looked at her differently with suspicion, distrust, and even condemnation. She remembered driving to school the day after the accident. Everyone seemed to know what had happened, but instead of the expected recognition or praise, she felt something different. One of her classmates passed by and threw a piece of paper at her feet. When she picked it up, she read the cold words, "You just wanted attention." Another, with whom she had never spoken, whispered, "Too much noise for someone like you." Such phrases were not new to Mia. As a black girl, she had faced prejudice all her life, but never before had her actions caused so much annoyance and hatred in some people. People she'd never met suddenly started questioning her intentions, and it hurt her more than she cared to admit. Later, in the news, someone bluntly said if it was a white girl, she would have already been awarded a medal. It stuck in her head. Why is it so hard to just acknowledge her courage? Why is it always necessary to look for a different subtext if the hero is a black person? As she, Marion, and the man climbed into the old car and set off, Mia couldn't shake off these thoughts. She suddenly realized that her action was not just a personal test, but also a test of society, which always saw in her not what she really was. "You look thoughtful," Marion remarked, turning to her. The woman looked tired, but there was wisdom in her eyes, accumulated over years of difficult life. "Why did all this happen?" Mia asked softly, finally torn between her thoughts and her fears. "I was just trying to help, but suddenly it was more than just saving a person. People, they look at me like I did something wrong." Marion sighed, understanding. She turned to look at her, and there was a bitter truth in her eyes. "You didn't just help a person, Mia. You've changed the narrative. Black girl is a hero, brave and strong. Many people don't like it. You've broken the invisible boundaries that society has built over the centuries. When we go beyond these boundaries, there are those who are not ready to accept it." "But why? Why me? I just wanted to help." Mia's voice trembled with helplessness. "Because being black in this world always means something more than just being human. People will look at you through the lens of their prejudices. They're used to seeing us on the margins, victims but not saviors. When we become heroes, the world feels uncomfortable because it doesn't fit in with their worldview." Marion continued, her voice full of bitterness and understanding. The man behind the wheel nodded. "This is a cruel truth. Mia, you didn't just save a man. You've broken the stereotype, and it scares people. Society is not used to seeing us blacks as those who do great things. They were used to a different image, and your action challenged their usual perception." Mia stared out the window, watching the city's night lights flicker past the window. It wasn't fair. She didn't ask for such fame, didn't ask to be a hero, but now that she was in the limelight, she felt like she had a responsibility not only to save her life, but also to make sure that what she had done was recognized, regardless of the color of her skin. In the silence of the car, She recalled the times when her father, an army veteran, had told her that in the service, blacks had to fight not only the enemy on the battlefield, but also the prejudices of their fellow soldiers. Her mother, a teacher, often said that every step she took was like a fight for a place in the sun, where she had to prove her right to succeed again and again, just because she was a black woman. And now Mia was facing the same thing. Saving her wasn't just a brave act. It became an act of resistance against old stereotypes, against the fact that her abilities and merits are being questioned. Even now, in a world where there was so much talk about equality, the reality was often different. But in that moment, Mia realized one thing: she shouldn't have apologized for what she'd done. No matter what people say, she did what she thought was right, and if her courage can change not only one life, but also change someone's views, then perhaps her path to true heroism is just beginning. What now? Mia finally asked, more firmly now, ready to face any challenges. Marion looked at her with a smile. Now you should be stronger than ever. You will have to learn the truth not only about what happened to me, but also about yourself, about who you are and why your story is so important to all of us. Mia realized that this wasn't just her fight. This is a struggle for the right to be who she is, despite the color of her skin and the stereotypes of society. And this was only the first step on her new path. The car was moving through the dark streets of the city when Marion's words began to sink in more and more deeply in Mia's mind. Her feat became a symbol of much more than she could have imagined. This isn't just a story about saving a woman from being run over by a car, it's a challenge to a system that sees her through the lens of racial stereotypes. But how do you deal with the fact that you're suddenly the center of attention that you didn't ask for? They arrived at an old warehouse on the outskirts of town, a place where Marion and her driver intended to hide until it became clear that no one else was following them. It was damp and cold inside, but Mia felt oddly protected from the outside world, even as her anxiety grew inside. As they sat down in the battered chairs, Mia said, "Marion, you said things have changed. What did you find out that you were being hunted, and why does it concern me?" Marion sighed heavily, leaning against the wall. Her face was shadowed by the dim lamplight, but there was determination in her eyes. "Mia, this isn't just a random accident. I was part of a group of people who fought for a long time against injustice, a system that is hidden from the eyes of ordinary people. We have revealed that the government and large corporations are colluding to hide the true state of affairs. They manipulate society by creating false images, including about people like you and me, especially black women." Mia felt something flip inside her. But what does this have to do with that accident? Marion nodded, as if she'd expected the question. "I found information that could change everything. Documents that prove that the government secretly interfered with programs to help black communities, undermining their development. They deliberately inflated criminal statistics, discredited our success, and hindered the equality that is so much talked about on paper. I tried to pass these documents to the press, but they were already following me. So those people, the ones in the car, they were the ones who tried to stop you?" Mia began piecing together the pieces, feeling them all intertwined with her own personal experience. "Yes," Marion said quietly. "When you saved me, they realized that I was still alive and that I might have the documents. Now they're not just hunting me, but you, too, because you've become a witness. And what's more, you've become a symbol of something bigger, that a black girl can do a great thing, even when the world resists her." Mia sat deep in thought, listening to every word. She had always known that the world was unfair, that the system rarely played on the side of people like her. But now this injustice has taken on more concrete forms. She realized that her heroic act was a threat to those who had spent years trying to keep black people in the shadows, in negative stereotypes. Her actions didn't just save lives, they destroyed the symbolism of oppression that society has worked so hard to maintain. The man who had brought them here suddenly stood up and said, "We need to move. It's not safe here." He looked at Mia and added, "You have to understand, now you are part of this struggle. You're already seen as a threat, and they won't stop until they drown out your voice." Mia nodded, flustered but determined. "What can we do?" Marion looked at her with wisdom in her eyes, as if weighing her words. "We need to get the truth out. People need to know what's going on. The documents that I have collected should be handed over to the right people, journalists, activists, those who can use this information to fight. But you said we were being watched. How can we do this without putting ourselves in danger?" Mia asked, not hiding her fear. The man chuckled. "We know how to hide, but you will have to make a choice. Stay in the shadows or go out into the light. If you choose the latter, There will be no turning back. Mia thought about it. Her life up to this point had been ordinary: school, friends, plans for the future. But now she is faced with a choice that will determine her fate and the future of many others. She could run away, hide, and try to forget, but she knew the truth was unavoidable. No matter how difficult it was, she could not turn a blind eye to the injustice that affected not only her, but also everyone who faced systemic oppression. "I won't be silent," she finally said, looking directly at Marion. "If I have a chance to change something, I'm willing to take the risk." Marion smiled, her face softening, and she looked pleased with that answer. "Then we won't waste any time." Mia knew that her decision would lead to new dangers. She has become a symbol of the struggle, not just for the truth, but for a future where people like her will no longer remain in the shadows. Mia sat in the car, her mind racing like an overheated engine. Her hands were shaking, though she tried to keep calm. She had made a choice, and there was really no turning back. Now her life as she knew it was over. The world had changed. She was on the verge of something bigger, but dangerous. And this more was not just about Marion's mysterious documents, but also about the deeper, painful truth that she had been carrying since birth: the color of her skin. They drove in silence, only the car's engine breaking the silence. Mia glanced at Marion, who looked calm, though her face showed signs of recent worry. The man behind the wheel was as focused as ever, his eyes fixed on the road. Mia didn't know his name, but she sensed it was reliable. "Where are we going?" she finally asked, breaking the silence. "We're on our way to someone who can help put the information in the hands of the right people," Marion replied, keeping her eyes on the road. "He's a journalist, one of the few people you can trust, but it's dangerous. As soon as the documents get out in the media, you and I will be searched even harder. They will do everything to discredit not only me, but also you." Mia took a deep breath, realizing that this was just the beginning. She thought back to her school days, when long before the accident, she had faced prejudice, teachers who expected less of her, classmates who automatically put her in the girls with problems category. Even if she tried to prove otherwise, she seemed to have to work twice as hard to get notice. But now that she had saved the man, it was all about racial prejudice again. People didn't believe in her heroism because she didn't fit in with their ideas of what a hero should look like. She suddenly remembered the headlines she'd seen on the news after the accident. One of them particularly hurt her. "A black girl saves an old lady." But not everything is so simple. Suspicions, doubts, and even conspiracy theories all stem from the fact that she was black. Her act, which was supposed to be an act of humanity, suddenly became a source of sensation and condemnation. Mia asked Marion, finding it hard to speak, "How are you coping with this? How do you live with the fact that people don't see you for who you really are?" Marion looked at her, and her eyes reflected years of fear and struggle. "You don't get used to it," she said softly, "but you're learning to be stronger. In our world, Mia, skin color is not just an identity. It's part of how others see you. People look at us and immediately decide who we are. Without looking any deeper, it's easier for them to believe in stereotypes than to see the truth." Mia felt a lump in her throat stop her from speaking. These words resonated with her own feelings, those hidden resentments that she had accumulated in herself all her life. Ever since she was a child, she felt that she was viewed differently, as if her abilities were limited in advance not by her talents, but by the color of her skin. She didn't just have to fight for success, she had to prove her right to exist in this world. "Remember your school," Marion continued. "You must have seen it for yourself. They look at us in disbelief, as if we've stolen something. Even when we save someone's life, they still have doubts." Mia nodded. How many times had she been told that she was too smart for her race or that her achievements were just a fluke? She knew that saving Marion hadn't changed her position in the public eye. It only made her more visible, not as a hero, but as a person who can't be trusted because he broke the usual boundaries. "I can't change the way they see me," Mia said bitterly, "but I'm not going to back down. If I've already found myself in the spotlight, I want to use it to show that I'm worth more." Marion looked at her with respect. "You're right, Mia. You're worth more than that, but you'll have to be prepared. The people who will fight against us will stop at nothing to get things back on track." And in that moment, Mia realized that her fight wasn't just a fight for the truth that Marion's documents were hiding. It's a struggle to make her voice heard in a world that's used to ignoring people like her. She couldn't just be an observer anymore. Her life, her experiences, and her actions now carried more than she could have expected. The car pulled up to an old building. The journalist they were looking for was waiting for them inside, but before they entered, Marion stopped at the door and said softly, "Mia, this is your moment. Your chance to change the way you and others like you are seen in the world. Are you ready?" Mia, feeling the full weight of responsibility, took a deep breath and nodded. "I'm ready, and I won't back down." Inside the building, they were met by a bespectacled man with a laptop in front of him. He was focused and clearly knew that they had brought something important with them, but before they could speak, the door suddenly opened with a bang. Several men in black agent suits burst into the room. Their faces were cold and dispassionate, but their eyes were clear. It was a hunt. Marion grabbed Mia's arm sharply, pulling her out of the way. The journalist tried to hide the documents in a panic, but it was useless. They were found. "Run, Mia!" shouted Marion, and in that moment Mia realized that their battle had just begun. Mia's heart beat faster as she watched the black-suited agents rush toward them. She didn't have time to think. She felt the adrenaline rush through her veins, and her feet carried her deeper into the building. She turned sharply to the right, hoping to find a way out, but everything was in turmoil. Behind her, Marion and the journalist screamed as they tried to deal with the attackers. The doors and corridors of the old building seemed like a maze, and every second seemed like an eternity. Mia ran, hearing the agent's footsteps behind her, but not stopping. Her mind was full of thoughts. If they caught her, it would all be over. She knew that it wasn't just her personal safety at stake, but her ability to change the system that had oppressed her community for so long. She crashed into a narrow corridor that seemed to lead into darkness. A musty smell mingled with the uneasy atmosphere. Mia paused for a moment, listening to the sounds behind her. The agents' voices were getting louder, and at that moment, she felt like she was losing control. Suddenly, her gaze fell on a window that was slightly ajar at the end of the corridor. Mia darted in, giving him a quick shove, and ran out into the street. The cold air hit her in the face, and she remembered how weightless she felt, as if she had sprinted into freedom. However, the street was only partially familiar. She glanced back to see that one of the agents had also jumped out after her. His face was contorted with anger, and he was clutching something that might have been a weapon. Mia ran away, not noticing where her feet were going, and soon found herself in a small alley that seemed deserted. "Where is everyone?" flashed through my mind. She knew she couldn't hide here, but just as fear was beginning to overwhelm her, Mia noticed a small group of people on the other side of the street. They were gathering, and there was a tense atmosphere in the air, as if they were waiting for something important to happen. She remembered that there were friends and acquaintances around who supported her. It was then that Mia realized she needed to call for help, and she shouted, trying her best to attract attention, "Help me!" Some of them turned around when they heard her shout. Mia saw her classmates who witnessed her struggle as she saved Marion, but there were also some who looked at her in disbelief. Their stares reminded her of the stereotypes she wanted to break. "It's her! It's that girl!" one of them shouted. "She saved that grandmother, remember?" But instead of supporting her, Mia saw a few people start whispering and casting looks of disdain in her direction. It was as if their admiration for her heroism was dissipating, and they were once again surrounded by an atmosphere of distrust. They didn't see her as a savior, she realized, but as a threat. In their eyes, her skin color turned her feet into something questionable. Mia felt a sense of confusion creep over her. "No, it's not like that," she thought. "I saved a life. I did what was supposed to be right." But instead, she faced misunderstanding and bias. Meanwhile, the agent chasing her came out of the alley. He also noticed a group of people, and when he saw that they knew Mia, his face was contorted with rage. He raised his weapon, ready to say something, but at that moment one of her friends, noticing the danger, shouted, "Watch out!" Mia screamed as the group scattered, and fear gripped her. She knew this was her moment, not just for her protection, but for everyone who believed in her. She needed to change her perception of herself, and she decided that she would not back down. "Wait, I'm not the enemy," she shouted to her classmates, trying to win back their trust. "I saved a life. I didn't want this." The agent ignored her. He continued to move toward her, and in that instant, as the group dispersed, she remembered that she was supposed to be the voice of those who were often ignored. She took a step forward. "I know you don't believe me," she screamed, "but listen, you may not understand why I did it, but that doesn't mean I didn't have the right to do it. I didn't do it for fame, but because I thought it was the right thing to do." Her words sounded like a challenge, and for a moment the group froze. She noticed one of her friends, Jake, begin to walk slowly toward her. His face showed confusion and incomprehension, but he still seemed to be trying to believe it. "It's not just about you, Mia," he shouted. "It's about us, how they see us. We shouldn't let them identify us by our skin color." Mia felt a fire ignite inside her. She knew that this wasn't just her fight, it was everyone's fight. "Yes, we must fight for what is right," she shouted to the others. "Each of us has the right to be heard, regardless of our skin color." Mia's words started to sound like a call, and at that moment, Jake, standing next to her, added, "Mia's right. She did something that many of us would have feared, and instead of condemning it, we should support it." This was a watershed moment. Some of her classmates began to slowly draw closer, and they began to band together, feeling a common purpose. This was the moment when they realized that they could be the voice of change. Meanwhile, the agent in front of them realized that the situation was getting out of hand. He raised his weapon, but at that moment Mia took a step forward and screamed, "You can stop us, but you can't destroy what we believe in." Mia's words reflected the intensity of the moment. The group behind her was coming together, and even among people who were previously wary, conversations began to surface about the importance of supporting each other, regardless of differences. At this point, they were joined by another person, a woman who witnessed the incident. She raised her hand to stop the agents. "These kids aren't enemies. They are fighting for truth and justice. We should be on their side," she shouted. The agent, feeling his strength waning, stopped, not knowing how to react. Mia looked at him defiantly, knowing this was her chance. If they unite, they can make a difference. As if sensing her confidence, everyone started talking, each adding their own point of view about how people of color are perceived by society, how their success is devalued, and how important it is for them to fight for equality. Mia felt an energy building up inside her that gave her confidence. "We won't be afraid. We will talk. This is our chance to change society, and we must not let anyone stop us." The silence around her suddenly filled with sounds as others joined in with her screams. She realized that this struggle is not only hers, but also for all those who have ever suffered from bias and injustice. They were all in the same formation now. The agent, realizing that his threats were no longer working, stepped back, hesitating. He didn't expect ordinary people to band together to oppose a system that behaved as if their rights never existed. Mia and her friend's words now echoed through the alley, reflecting their determination and strength. This was their moment, the moment when they realized that they could be stronger than single attempts. It wasn't just a fight for Marion's papers, it was a fight for identity, for recognition, for equality. Mia took a step forward and looked into the agent's eyes as she said, "We don't just save lives, we are changing the system, and if you need to stop us, you can try, but know this, we are here, and we will not leave." As if in response to Mia and her friend's determination, a sense of change filled the air around them. They stood shoulder to shoulder, united against the system that held them back. But at that moment, when hope and determination reached their peak, tragedy burst into their lives like a dark shadow waiting for the right moment. Just as they retreated, a sharp sound rang out. It was a shot, loud, piercing as a thunderclap. It shook the air and made everyone freeze. Mia turned in the direction of the sound and saw one of the agents shoot into the air in a panicked attempt to regain control. At that moment, she noticed one of her friends, Jake, trying to get between them and the agent, showing true heroism. Mia screamed, but it was too late. The next thing she knew, Jake was shot in the shoulder while defending her. He fell to the ground, and screams of fright filled the space. Everyone around them froze in shock and horror. For Mia, the world suddenly turned gray, as if the colors were slipping away. "Jake!" she screamed, rushing toward him. She couldn't believe what had happened. There was panic all around, and the screams were intertwined with the silence in which only her heartbeat could be heard. She was leaning over him, and his face was contorted with pain. "It's going to be okay, Jake. Hold on," she whispered, trying to calm herself and him. Mia tried to wrap her t-shirt around the wound, but her hands were shaking with fear and pain. Blood trickled down his arm, and she felt her world crumble. But instead of supporting her, she saw a group of people start to run in different directions, as if each one was trying to escape from an impending threat. At a time when she needed support, she was left alone with Jake. "Don't leave me," he whispered, raising his hand with difficulty to touch her cheek. She saw his eyes fill with tears, and her own eyes filled with a bitter, burning wave. Mia couldn't hold back the tears. "I'm here. I'm not leaving," she kept repeating, but helplessness was growing inside her. She knew that without medical attention, Jake didn't stand a chance. There was panic all around them, and she felt that she needed help. At that moment, her eyes met Marion's face as she tried to make her way through the crowd. "Mia!" she shouted, running up to them. There was determination in her eyes, but they were filled with fear for her life and for Jake's. "I need help," shouted Mia as Marion came closer. She tried to hold back her tears, but she couldn't. She didn't have the strength to be strong. "I'm going to call an ambulance," Marion replied, trying to get the situation under control. She took out her phone and quickly dialed a number, then started talking, explaining what had happened. But when she started talking about the wounded man, her voice filled with concern. "Please hurry," she exclaimed, looking around as if looking for help to come from. At that moment, when time seemed to slow down and Mia realized that her world was changing, she noticed one of the agents who had managed to hide from the eyes of the crowd begin to move in their direction. He was ready to act. His intentions were clear: to remove the witnesses and eliminate the threat. "Marion, go away," she screamed, knowing she couldn't let anyone else get hurt right now. "We need to leave." But Marion stood her ground, her face full of fear and determination. She couldn't leave them. "I won't leave you," she said, clearly aware that she was risking her own life. Jake, feeling the power drain from him, growled, "Don't, Mia, go away. You don't have to put yourself in danger because of me." He tried to raise his hand, but only lowered it weakly to the ground as his breathing became increasingly heavy. Mia turned to look at him, tears running down her cheeks. "I won't leave you, Jake," she replied with determination, her voice shaking with fear and love. She couldn't imagine life without him. He was always there for me, supporting me and inspiring me. "Help's coming soon. Hold on," shouted Marion, but her words seemed empty. Fear was building inside Mia, and she knew that every second counted. But suddenly, as if the world itself had decided to intervene in this tragedy, sirens sounded in the distance. It was the sound they had all been waiting for, and it sounded like a melody of hope. But the joy didn't last long when they saw a group of agents who had clearly received a command start moving towards the sound. Jake yelled, his voice shaking with pain, but he was still trying to stay calm. Mia turned around, feeling the world crumble around her. Her heart was breaking. She couldn't leave him, but it was dangerous to stay. Then she made a decision that changed everything. "I won't leave you," she said, and when her resolve reached its peak, she tried to lift Jake up despite his protests. "We can't give up." Marion looked around in panic, knowing they had to hurry. "Help her. Jake, we have to leave," she shouted, drawing the attention of the people around her. In that moment, when Jake was about to give up, he felt his friend doing everything possible to keep him. She didn't leave him, even when everything was falling apart. "We can handle it. I won't leave you," she continued, supporting him on his feet. But it was harder than she thought. Jake was heavy, and his wound made it impossible for him to move. Mia's eyes darted down the street for help, but every time she tried to pick him up, he just fell back to the ground. Time passed, and with each passing second, the feeling that he was leaving became stronger. Suddenly, another shot rang out. Mia screamed as the bullet hit the wall next to them. She felt a wave of fear wash over her. It was a real war, and they were in the middle of it. Jake yelled again, his voice growing more urgent. "I can't. I won't leave you." But she could see the determination in his eyes. He didn't want her to suffer for him. In that moment, he knew that their lives were now hanging in the balance, and the only way to save her was to make her leave. Marion, who also realized this, exclaimed, "We have to leave. This is our only hope." Mia took one last desperate look at Jake. "You'll be fine, I promise," she said, but there was already uncertainty in her voice. She slowly began to back away, her eyes brimming with tears, but as she turned to leave, Jake grabbed her arm and said, "Do this for us, Mia. You have to keep fighting. Live." With that, he released her hand, and she felt their bond break. Mia, full of pain and unbearable loss, stood there, unable to believe what was happening. But Jake was right. If she didn't leave, they'd both be dead. Marion, seeing her hesitate, shouted, "Come on, Mia, we have to leave now." Soon, the sound of sirens drew nearer and filled the air with hope, but also with extreme fear. Mia, full of emotion, suddenly realized that she needed to pull herself together and take responsibility. She couldn't afford to give up, not for Jake's sake, not for the sake of all those who fought for equality and justice. Summoning all her resolve, she looked at Jake one last time. He was lying on the ground, his face contorted with pain, and Mia's heart was breaking with despair. "I'll be back, I promise," she shouted, turning and running for the exit. Every movement was filled with fear and determination. She knew she had to save herself, at least, so that she could come back and do whatever it took for Jake. Meanwhile, Marion was already running toward the car where they'd left their stuff. "Come on, Mia, hurry up," she screamed, her voice filled with despair, mentioning that they only had a few minutes before the agents finally regained control of the situation. They jumped into the car and Marion started the engine. Mia glanced back, her heart pounding as she saw Jake raise his head, albeit with difficulty, and try to say something, but she couldn't afford to stop. "I'll do anything to help you," she whispered to herself, barely able to hold back the tears. As soon as they left the scene of the accident, Mia felt the adrenaline rush through her. "Where are we going?" she asked as they passed a crowd of people who were still standing there, completely confused by what had happened. "To the hospital," Marion said, not taking her eyes off the road. "We need to call an ambulance for Jake. We have to save him." Emotions raged inside Mia. She felt like her life had changed forever. The situation they were facing wasn't just about Jake, it was also about how society perceived them. "Why is this happening? Why is everything so complicated?" she kept repeating to herself, hating the system that had created such unbearable conditions for them. When they finally arrived at the hospital, anxiety gripped her. Mia knew there was no time left. They ran out of the car and rushed inside, where they were met by medical staff. Marion began to explain the situation as Mia stood by, her heart pounding in fear for Jake. He was injured. Marion screamed, her voice sounding hysterical. The doctors quickly set to work, and Mia felt her world go dark as she watched Jake being carried away on a gurney. She wanted to follow him, but was interrupted. "Please wait here," one of the medics said. "We will do everything we can to help him, but we need to act quickly." Mia fought back tears. She knew Jake needed her, but they wouldn't let her in. She looked around, feeling the fear for him consume her. What if he doesn't survive? She thought, her mind filled with dark thoughts. Time passed like an eternity. Marion tried to calm her down, but they both knew the situation was critical. "He's strong, Mia. He'll get over it," she tried to convince her friend, but her voice was shaking with fear. Finally, after a long wait, a doctor approached them. She looked serious and focused. "We did everything we could," she said, and Mia's heart began to pound with fear. "But his condition is stable and he needs further observation. He's in intensive care, but we're hoping for the best." Mia couldn't hold back the tears. It was a relief, but also a realization that it wasn't over yet. "Can I see him?" she asked, her voice trembling with emotion. "Unfortunately, not now. We can't let his condition get worse. If everything goes well, we'll let you see him later," the doctor replied. Mia felt her world crumble again. "He must survive. He must," she whispered, full of determination. She decided that she would stay by Jake's side until he recovered. She had to do everything in her power to help him. For the next few days, she stayed in the hospital, waiting and praying for him. She knew that these moments of waiting could be filled with both hope and fear, and there was constant anxiety in her heart. What if Jake doesn't survive? What will happen to her? What will happen to their struggle for equality and justice? Meanwhile, in the corridors of the hospital, people started talking about what had happened. Mia learned that the severity of the incident caused a wave of discussion, not only among her friends, but also in the community. People started asking questions about racism, how they were perceived by society, and how their lives might change. But while many people supported them, and public attention was drawn to the situation, others began to condemn Mia and her friends. Some said that they were to blame for what happened, because they were too active, too brave. She could hear whispers in the hallways, and it hurt her. Why don't they understand? She asked herself, and her anger and bewilderment grew. That same night, when Mia was back in the waiting room, she had a dream. She saw Jake standing in the bright light, his face glowing. He was safe and smiling, but then his smile suddenly disappeared and he reached for her. "I can't stay," "Mia, I have to go, but you have to fight. For us, to all of us," he said, and there was a fire in his eyes that she couldn't ignore. Through her tears, she realized that she couldn't afford to lose heart. She was supposed to be the voice of those who suffer. She had to fight not only for Jake, but for all those who faced injustice and prejudice. The next day, when she returned to the intensive care unit, she was overcome by a sense of anxiety. She walked over to Jake's bed, and her heart beat faster as she saw him lying silently, plugged into the machines. She felt tears welling up in her eyes again. "I'm here, Jake. I won't leave you," she whispered, taking his hand gently in hers. Emotions swirled inside her. She knew that they would have a long road of recovery ahead of them, but there was a fire of hope burning in her heart. Jake had to survive, and she was ready to fight for him. This moment was not only a tragedy for her, but also a catalyst for change, both for her and for everyone else who faced similar circumstances. And despite the pain, she decided that her story would not end in tragedy. She will continue to fight, because it is in difficult times that people become stronger, and her voice should have sounded louder than ever. With that thought in mind, she left the room, determined to do whatever it took to change the world for the better, both for Jake and for everyone else in their position. In the hospital, where Mia had spent sleepless nights, she still felt the weight of what had happened to Jake. Every day, she saw doctors working on his recovery, but his condition remained critical. But the real struggle for her was not only physical, but also emotional, how to deal with the bias that surrounded them. One day, when Mia went outside to get some fresh air, she overheard two people talking. They were standing nearby, and her ears picked up words full of judgment and prejudice. "Why did they interfere at all? They shouldn't have just stayed away," said one woman. Mia froze, her heart beating faster, her blood boiled with indignation. "How can they say that?" she thought. But she knew that this wasn't the first or last instance of racism she would have to face. She recalled all the times when she and her friends were judged only by the color of their skin, when they were told that they should know their place. But when she heard such talk in the heart of the hospital, she was filled with a sense of deep disappointment. Why can't they see that we are fighting for our lives, for equality? Her thoughts were filled with anger and pain. When she got back to the room, she found Marion trying to calm Jake down when his condition got a little better. "He's starting to respond to treatment," Marion said, sounding hopeful. But Mia couldn't forget the words she'd heard on the street. "Marion, you have no idea what I just heard," she said, sitting down next to her friend. "People still don't understand. They think that we are simply to blame for what happened." Marion looked at her with concern. "We have to do something about this. Mia, we can't just sit back and let them talk like that. This isn't right." Her voice was full of determination. "But how? We're a small group, and the world seems so big and cruel," Mia replied, her voice shaking with emotion. She could feel the pressure building, the feeling that they were fighting not only for Jake, but also for their identity, for their lives, weighed heavily on her. Suddenly, the doctor who was supervising Jake's treatment approached them. "I have some news," she said. But before she could continue, she noticed how tense the atmosphere had become. "We did everything possible to stabilize his condition, but he needs a lot of time to recover, and it can be a long process." Mia nodded, trying to figure out exactly what that meant. But at the same time, she knew that she had to fight not only for Jake's health, but also for changing the attitude of others. "We need to be a voice for everyone who is confronted with such things," she said. After talking to the doctor, Mia and Marion decided to spend time at the hospital cafe to discuss their plans. They discussed how they could use their situation to draw attention to the issues of racism and discrimination faced by their communities. "We can start with social media," Marion suggested. "Let's create a campaign, tell our story, and show how important it is to stand together, how important it is to talk about what is happening in our society." Mia nodded, her heart beating faster. She felt that this might be the beginning of something bigger. "We can collect signatures, attract media attention, organize protests. This is our chance to make the world a better place," she said, and there was determination in her voice. After gathering their strength, they began planning their campaign. Every morning when Mia came to the hospital, she brought new ideas and strategies that they could use to draw attention to their situation. Soon, they attracted a group of college students willing to support their initiative. But as they moved forward, they encountered new obstacles. At one of the meetings with other students, Someone expressed doubts. Is it worth doing this at all? Maybe it will just draw unnecessary attention to you. Mia felt her anger rise again. If we don't talk about problems, they will never be solved. We must show that racism is a real problem that many people face, she exclaimed, trying to convey her thoughts to others. The situation escalated. Some students started to support them, but others remained skeptical. Their confidence was being questioned. Mia, feeling the pressure building, realized that fighting for her beliefs had become not only difficult, but also dangerous. She knew that her voice needed to be heard, but she also understood that every step could have consequences. Meanwhile, Jake remained in intensive care. Mia often came to see him, and every time she saw him, hope flared up in her heart. She knew that he was her rock, and she was ready to fight for him, for their shared dream of equality and justice. One day, when she visited him again, she noticed that his condition was a little better. Jake opened his eyes slowly. He saw Mia, and a faint smile on his face filled her with joy. "You didn't leave me," he said, his voice barely audible but full of power. "I'll never leave you," she replied, her voice shaking with emotion. "We are with you, and I promise that we will fight, not just for you, but for everyone who faces bias and discrimination." Jake nodded, his eyes full of determination. "I want to help. I want our voices to be heard," he said, and there was a power in his words that inspired Mia. From that moment on, they decided to join forces. Every visit Mia made to Jake turned into a strategy session. She told him about the plan she had made with Marion and the other students. They discussed how important it is to create a platform for sharing stories, and how they can use their experiences to inspire others. Over time, they began to receive support from not only students, but also adults, activists who were ready to help them in their struggle. New ideas emerged, organizing rallies, collecting signatures, creating videos with stories about their experiences, and interviewing people who had experienced racism. However, their efforts were not ignored. Some people started showing negative reactions, they received threats, and some even found themselves at the center of scandals on social networks. "You're causing unnecessary problems," they wrote in the comments, viewed instead of breaking their spirits. It only spurred them to fight. "This is exactly what we need. We have to show that we are not afraid." Mia sighed as they discussed the public's reaction to their campaign. Her words inspired everyone, and everyone knew that they were on the right track. However, just as their efforts began to bear fruit, they were faced with a serious problem. At some point, Mia received an anonymous threatening message. "Close your mouths or you'll regret it," the message read. It shocked her to the core. She knew that fighting for rights and justice could be dangerous, but she never thought that they would be in such a situation. "What should we do? What is it?" she asked Marion, her voice filled with fear. They both knew that such threats could become a reality. "We can't back down. We can't let them bully us," Marion said with determination. Mia couldn't sleep for a long time that night. Her thoughts were filled with anxiety. She understood that their struggle was just beginning, and that unity was the real strength. They had to be careful, but at the same time, they couldn't let fear rule them. The next day, when she came back to the hospital, Jake noticed that something was wrong. "Are you okay, Mia?" he asked, his eyes troubled. She sighed and collected her thoughts, telling him about the message. Jake nodded, and Mia saw the reassurance in his eyes. "We can't give up. We need to be strong and keep talking," he said. And in that moment, Mia realized that they were fighting not just for themselves, but for everyone else who was going through something like this. This was their story, and they had to do everything to change the world for the better. With that thought in mind, she left the room determined. She knew they were going to have some tough times ahead, but together with Jake and their friends, they were ready to fight for their truth and equality. As Mia and Jake became more involved in their campaign, they began to receive support from different groups. They began organizing events in community centers, gathering people willing to discuss racism and bias. Each new meeting filled them with hope, but at the same time they faced increasing opposition. One day, when they were preparing an open-air rally, they were approached by a group of people who openly opposed their initiative. They chanted slogans and held banners with provocative messages: "Order first, then equality, and don't let yourself be deceived." It wasn't just unpleasant, it was frightening. "Don't pay any attention to them," Marion said. When Mia felt a surge of alarm, "We are here to talk about our stories, and we have the right to do so," but Mia couldn't ignore the situation. Every shout, Every negative comment felt suffocating. The night after the rally, when the adrenaline had subsided, Mia sat on the edge of her bed and thought about what had happened. She felt a sense of hopelessness creep over her. Why is this happening? Why are they so afraid of change? She wondered. She felt that she had no support, and that this struggle was becoming more and more isolating. But then the thought came to me, if they are afraid of changes, then these changes are necessary. We have to keep going, she whispered to herself, trying to find the confidence inside. It's not just a fight for us, it's a fight for the future. The next day, Jake, who was slowly recovering, came to the hospital. He looked better, and that gave Mia some strength. You have no idea how many people support us. I saw how many people came to the rally, he said, his voice full of enthusiasm. But we faced opposition. I'm not sure we can do this, Mia replied, her voice still filled with doubt. You have to believe that every vote counts. Mia, we have to keep talking. Don't let them intimidate us, Jake replied, his confidence infectious. It reminded Mia of why they'd started this movement. They couldn't let prejudice consume their dreams. At the next meeting, they decided not only to discuss racism, but also to share their stories about how it affected their lives. Our strength is in our experience, Mia said at the meeting. We need to use our stories to inspire others. With each new event, the amount of support grew. People came and shared their stories, and soon they started to attract local media attention. However, while some supported them, others continued to challenge their approach. The messages on the internet were becoming increasingly threatening. One day, when Mia returned home, she found a threatening note on the door of her apartment. Get out of our neighborhood, or we'll do something bad for you, was written on the paper. Her heart beat faster with fear, and she couldn't hold back the tears. What if they decide to do something bad? At that moment, Marion called her. Mia, are you okay? I heard that someone left threats. We have to be careful, she said, sounding alarmed. I do not know how to react. We're fighting for something important, and it's just not right, Mia said, her voice shaking with excitement. We must continue. If we stop, it will only give them a chance to win, Marion replied, her voice filled with determination. The next day, they met with other members of the movement to discuss how to defend themselves and continue the fight. They decided to create a support group to share their experiences and support each other. Each of them had been through something similar, and it made them stronger. We must be united, and we must talk about what is happening. If we keep to ourselves, they will win, Mia said at the meeting. People nodded, and she sensed that they shared a common goal. With each new event, they felt their voices grow louder, but the threat also increased. Once, during a rally, a group of opponents staged a provocation. They started throwing rocks and shouting insults. Mia, seeing this, felt a surge of panic. It's dangerous, she shouted, trying to calm the crowd. But instead of going their separate ways, people started coming together. We're here to talk, someone shouted from the crowd. We're not leaving. Mia felt a fire ignite inside her. You are not alone. We're together, she shouted, her voice rising above the others. She saw others start to support her, holding up their placards and chanting, "Equality for all." As the situation escalated, Marion and Jake stepped forward to help ease the tension. We will not respond with hatred to hatred. We're here to talk about love and equality, Jake said, his words ringing in the air like a call for peace. This scene will be remembered by Mia for the rest of her life. They all stood shoulder to shoulder, despite the threats that would destroy them. We're here, and we're not leaving, she repeated to herself, feeling the strength grow in their unity. A few days later, they started receiving messages from people who supported them. Stories about people who had experienced racism started appearing on social media, and this wave of support inspired them to continue. However, the tension in society continued to grow. At one of the meetings, when they were discussing their plans, people burst into the hall and started interrupting their discussions by shouting insults. It was so unexpected that many people were confused. Mia, who felt that this was happening because of their efforts, decided to come forward. We are not against you. We are against hate, she said, her voice full of determination. She knew they couldn't let fear and hatred get the better of them. But the more they fought for their rights, the more opposition they faced. With each new step, they felt the pressure increase and their safety threatened. However, they decided not to give up. If we surrender, They will win. We must continue our struggle, Mia said at one of the meetings, and this strengthened everyone present. As time passed, they continued their campaign. They organized new events and did everything possible to draw attention to the problems of racism and bias. Each step became more difficult, but they continued to struggle because they knew that their votes were important. But just as they were beginning to feel that their efforts were beginning to bear fruit, a threat appeared on the horizon once again. Jake, who was still recovering, received a message from his lawyer that they were going to be sued. It came as a shock to everyone. "Why not? We're just telling the truth," shouted Marion, her voice filled with anger and frustration. "They're trying to silence us, but we won't do that," Mia replied, feeling fear and anger mingle inside. Jake braced himself and added, "We should use this as an opportunity. We can't let them bully us." With this thought in mind, they decided not to give up and prepare for the next stage of the fight. They organized a rally to discuss how to respond to the threats that came from their opponents. "If we're the only ones, we can handle this," Mia said, feeling her voice fill with hope. Their story became more and more famous, and they began to receive support from various groups. But with it came new threats. Every day became a struggle not only for equality, but also for one's own safety. Mia knew that they would have to continue, despite all the obstacles. This was not only their business, but also the business of all those who faced bias and injustice. And in the end, they decided, our struggle is our strength. Mia and her friends continued their campaign, gradually gaining trust and support from the community. Each new step gave them confidence, and they began to attract more people to their events. The rallies they held were becoming more and more widespread, and Mia felt that their story was really starting to change the opinion of others. One day, while planning a new event, they decided to invite local celebrities to draw more attention to their initiative. Mia sent several messages and, to her surprise, received a response from a well-known activist who agreed to come and speak. This was a great achievement, and they began to prepare for the event with renewed vigor. However, the closer the date of the event approached, the more tension grew. Opponents of their movement began to show themselves more and more aggressively. Mia received another threatening text message, this time with details that the moment will come when they will teach these half-wits to stay out of things that don't concern them. It made her uneasy, but she knew better than to back down. When the day of the event arrived, everyone was full of hope and excitement. The crowd was gathering, and there was a sense of energy in the air. Mia was the first to speak, her voice full of confidence, and she talked about the importance of continuing to fight for equality. But suddenly, as her speech began to gain popularity, there were shouts from the crowd. "Get out of here, we all want to see you," shouted the opponents who came to disrupt the rally. A scuffle soon broke out, and Mia felt a pang of panic. But at that moment, something unexpected happened. One of the opposition members, who did not like the aggressiveness of his companions, stepped forward and stood between them and the activists. "Stop, we are all human beings, and we have a right to an opinion," he shouted, and this caused confusion. Silence fell around them. Mia was startled by this turn of events. It was an unexpectedly bold act, and the other opposing members began to shift, growing increasingly frustrated with their actions. Mia, seeing this situation, decided to seize the moment. She addressed the crowd. "We all want one thing: to live in peace and harmony. We can discuss, share opinions, but hatred will never solve our problems." Her words resonated with many, and the tension began to subside. But just as the situation seemed to be resolved, several police officers appeared on the scene. One of them approached Mia and said, "We have received reports of unrest and have come to ensure order." This caused even more tension. Some of the opponents started shouting accusations at the activists, while others tried to explain that they just want peace. Mia felt a surge of confusion. "This shouldn't be happening. We just want to talk," she screamed. But the police began to separate the crowd, and many activists began to panic. At this time, Jake, who had just started to recover, came forward to support Mia. "Please give us a chance to speak out. We're not here to cause trouble," he said, his voice brimming with confidence. This caused applause from those who came to support the activists. But then the unexpected happened. One of the policemen, who seemed to be hostile, suddenly supported them. "I also want our voices to be heard, and I'm here to defend your right to speak," he said, which shocked everyone. This was a turning point. Mia and Jake looked at each other, realizing that a real change had taken place. The people slowly began to unite. and the calls for peace once again rang out in the air. The activists and even some of the opponents began to exchange glances, and smiles appeared on their faces as they realized that all they needed was an opportunity to listen to each other. After this unexpected turn, events began to change. People started taking to the stage to share their stories, and the atmosphere of the rally completely changed. Instead of aggression and hatred, mutual understanding has emerged. Mia could feel the energy and strength of community building as people started laughing and sharing experiences. "This is what we can do when we open our hearts," Mia said, and the crowd cheered. She knew that this event could be the beginning of something bigger. After the rally, when everything calmed down, Mia was approached by the same guy who stood between the activists and the opponents. "My name is Liam. I was wrong, and I want to help you. We can make a difference together," he said, his voice full of sincerity. It was an amazing moment for Mia. She knew that change starts with admitting your mistakes and being willing to work together. "Thank you, Liam. We can use your help, and it will be important for all of us," she said. Liam soon became part of their team, and they began working together to organize new events that focused on dialogue and exchange of views. They created a platform for people from different communities to share their stories and learn from each other. Mia and her friends started receiving messages from people who were interested in their initiative. They began receiving support from local organizations that wanted to help fight racism and bias. This inspired them to continue, and they began planning large-scale events that could draw even more attention to their cause. Meanwhile, Jake continued to recover and became more active in the movement. His voice grew louder, and he inspired the people around him. It was a symbol of hope and change, and it helped many overcome their fears and stereotypes. But there were still problems on the horizon. Even though they were starting to get support, they knew that the opponents weren't going to give up. Soon there were rumors in the city that a protest action against the activists was planned. This caused everyone to worry. Mia felt that this could all end badly. They held several meetings discussing how to proceed. "We can't let them bully us. We have to be strong and keep talking," she said, her voice full of determination. Soon it was time for a new promotion, and Mia realized that this would be a crucial moment. On the day of the action, they organized a powerful rally, which was attended by many people. They stood shoulder to shoulder, ready to face hatred and prejudice. But when they reached the square, they saw that their opponents were already waiting for them. The situation was tense to the limit. People started shouting insults, and the air was tense again. Mia felt her heart beat faster. "We can't let this escalate into violence," she thought. But at the moment when everything seemed hopeless, there was another unexpected twist. Liam, who had already done a lot to bring the two sides closer together, stepped forward. "Let's try to talk," he said, his voice brimming with confidence. And, to everyone's surprise, many of the opponents agreed. A dialogue began, during which people began to share their experiences, and soon the atmosphere changed. Instead of hatred, understanding emerged, and they began to talk about the importance of respecting each other and listening to each other. Mia and her friends looked on hopefully. They understood that this was the beginning of a new stage, a stage where dialogue can replace hatred, and mutual understanding can build bridges instead of walls. And this unexpected change has become a symbol for them that even in the most difficult situations, it is possible to find a common language and move towards peace. Now they knew that the struggle for equality was not only about confronting hatred, but also about creating a space for understanding and love. Although there were still many challenges ahead, they were ready to face them together, united by one goal: to create a world where everyone would be heard and respected. With each passing day, Mia and her team continued to develop their initiative. The dialogue that began during that unexpected rally inspired many, and soon activists began receiving requests from other cities willing to repeat their experience. Each new event brought with it hope and confidence, but also huge challenges that they still had to face. Despite all the efforts, the opposition did not subside. Rumors have surfaced in the city that some groups are planning to stage a protest to express dissatisfaction with the growth of this new movement. Mia felt that they couldn't let fear and hatred get the better of them. Instead, they decided to create an event that would bring people together, regardless of their views. However, despite their efforts to organize a peaceful dialogue, fear and distrust remained high. A few days before the planned event, Mia received an anonymous threatening message. "If you try to gather people, we will make you regret it." It made her uneasy, but she knew she had to keep going. "We can't let these threats intimidate us," She told her friends at the meeting, "If we retreat, it means they won." The day of the event arrived, and the crowd gathered in the square. Mia felt a surge of excitement rise inside her. She saw familiar faces, including not only her supporters, but also some of those who had previously expressed their dissatisfaction. Her heart was pounding as she stepped onto the stage. "We are here today to talk, listen, and understand each other," she began, her voice sounding confident. People looked at her with hope, and it gave her strength. "It's not just about us, it's about a future that we can build together." At this moment, just as the crowd was starting to react to her words, there was a commotion from one side of the square. The group of protesters who had previously threatened them came closer, holding together and shouting insults. Mia felt a surge of panic, but she knew she couldn't back down. Liam, noticing her concern, stepped forward. "Let's take a step back and talk," he said, addressing the protesters. The call was unexpected, but to her surprise, some of the protesters began to stop and listen. Mia took advantage of the moment to continue. "We're here to understand each other. This is not a massacre. This is a dialogue. We are all human beings, and we have a right to an opinion." Suddenly, one of the protesters, a tall man with shrewd eyes, stepped forward. "I don't agree with your opinion, but I want to understand why you're doing this," he said, and it was a real breakthrough. Mia could feel hope and determination in the air. "Let's tell each other our stories," she suggested. And, oddly enough, this was the beginning of a real conversation. People began to share their experiences. Some told about their struggle with prejudice, others about how they suffered from hatred. The situation began to change. Mia noticed that thoughtful faces were beginning to appear among the protesters. Soon, they started asking questions and listening. This unexpected turn of events was a landmark moment that many could not have foreseen. After some time, when the tension began to subside, one of the activists came forward and raised her hand. "We can all learn from each other. Let's be open." This elicited approval from both sides, and a process of mutual understanding began. Over the next few hours of the event, dialogue became the center of their interaction. Mia and her team began to make contact with the protesters, explaining why they were fighting for equality and justice. This was a real breakthrough in their work. However, as the celebration of unity and mutual understanding continued, Mia suddenly noticed that one of the members of the protesting group went to the side and started talking on the phone. Her heart began to beat faster. She felt that something was wrong. Just before the event, several men who were clearly aggressive started to gather at the side. They looked at each other and whispered, and it made Mia feel uneasy. She quickly turned to Jake and Liam. "Let's monitor the situation. I think they're up to something." Mia decided that they couldn't let their hatred take over again. "We need to talk to them," she said, pointing at the men. Jake and Liam nodded, and they walked over to the group. As they approached, the men turned around and started shouting insults, but instead of letting them respond with hatred, Mia steeled herself and said, "We're not here to fight. We are here to unite. Talk to us and we will try to understand your fears." It was a real challenge. One of the men looked at her with disdain and replied, "You have no right to talk about our fear. We don't want you to destroy our culture." Mia could feel the anger boiling inside her, but she knew she had to stay calm. "We are not against your culture. We just want everyone to be heard and understood," she said, trying to be as clear as possible. This caused confusion in the group. At this point, one of the protesters, the one who had first expressed a desire to understand, came forward again. "Look, maybe we all want the same thing. We just want to be heard and understood," he said, and this was a turning point. But right at that moment, something unexpected happened. Several masked men came around the corner, shouting threatening slogans and throwing objects at the crowd. This led to panic. Mia felt her heart pounding, and she quickly turned to her friends. "We need to break up." The crowd started to panic, and some tried to escape. Liam quickly approached Mia and Jake. "We need to keep people safe." They began to try to calm the crowd, explaining that they were not their enemies, that they needed to stay calm and not give in to fear. But when the situation started to get out of hand, Jake, who was still not in full shape, tried to stand up for the people. "Stop it! We're here to talk, not fight," he shouted, his voice filled with determination. It was a bold but dangerous decision. At that moment, one of the masked men walked straight towards him. Mia felt a sense of dread creep over her. "Jake, come back!" she screamed, but he couldn't leave people in the lurch. Everything happened instantly. The masked man seemed to be ready to attack, but suddenly, a loud sound rang out. It was the police who arrived at the scene. They quickly intervened, dividing the crowd and starting to disperse the hooligans. Despite the fact that the situation in the square has escalated, this unexpected intervention of the police seems to be the decisive moment. The masked men began to panic and run away, and soon they were gone, but Mia knew the fear remained. When everything calmed down, Mia looked at Jake. He stood there, a little disoriented, but unharmed. She ran to him and hugged him. "Are you all right? You shouldn't have taken that risk," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "I couldn't just watch people suffer," he said, trying to calm her down. However, this incident left a deep impression on everyone. Mia understood that, despite all the efforts for dialogue, hatred and fear remained at a high level. It was a hard road, but they knew they couldn't give up. In the weeks that followed, they continued to work on their initiative, realizing that more needed to be done to increase awareness and understanding. They organized roundtables, lectures and seminars where they discussed not only racism, but also the importance of unity. And although it was hard, they continued to believe in their goal, in peaceful coexistence and mutual understanding. However, Mia knew that there were still many challenges ahead. As before, the hatred remained alive, and they had to be prepared for further challenges. But despite everything, they were determined to continue their work without letting the darkness take over their hearts. One day, as Mia was sitting at her desk, thinking about the future, her phone rang. It was Liam. "We received an invitation to a peace festival in a nearby city," he said. "They want us to talk about our experience and share our movement. This could be a great opportunity." Mia felt a surge of excitement. This could be the beginning of something new. "Let's do it," she replied, her heart brimming with hope. They began preparing for the trip, realizing that every step toward change mattered. This opportunity could give them more strength, and they knew that by teaming up, they could handle whatever challenges lay ahead. As soon as Mia and her team arrived at the Peace Festival in a nearby town, they were blown away by the scale of the event. Crowds of people, united by a common goal, filled the square. Music played on every corner, and smiles lit up the faces of the participants. It was like a huge celebration of unity. Mia felt a surge of hope when she saw different communities coming together to celebrate diversity. The festival organizers invited them to perform on the main stage, and this was a huge achievement for them. They understood that now their voice would be heard not only in their city, but also beyond its borders. When Mia came on stage, she felt a powerful charge of energy. "Hello, friends. We are here to share our story and tell you how important it is to come together to achieve justice and understanding," she said, and the crowd cheered loudly. After her speech, Liam came up to the microphone. "We can all make the world a better place if we work together," he said, and his words resonated with many. People started cheering, and there was an air of unity in the air. After the performance, Mia and her team decided to take a walk around the festival. They met many people who shared their stories about the fight against racism and hatred, and most importantly, how they overcame difficulties by coming together. One of the festival participants, an elderly woman named Grace, came up to them and said, "I was amazed by your performance. Your courage inspires me. I want to help you with your movement." She spoke about her life and how many years ago she herself faced bias. Grace offered her resources and connections to help them organize new events and workshops. This suggestion surprised Mia and her team. They never thought that they would be able to find support from such an experienced and wise woman. "Thank you, Grace. It means a lot to us," Mia said, her eyes shining with joy. Later at the festival, they witnessed another important moment. The organizers announced the launch of a fundraising campaign for local organizations fighting racism. Mia and her friends decided to join this initiative, realizing that each contribution can help in their common struggle. During the day, they also met a young couple who ran a cafe that specialized in local cuisine. "We would like to invite you to hold a meeting with us for your movement. We have a place, and we are ready to support you," they said. This suggestion filled Mia with hope. Their movement began to grow and gain popularity. When the festival came to an end, it became obvious that it was not just a celebration, it was the beginning of something bigger. Mia sensed that their efforts were beginning to bear fruit. She saw how people around her were beginning to come together, supporting each other and working to create a more just society. Later in the evening, When the festival ended, they gathered in the open air, surrounded by burning lights and people sharing joy and laughter. Mia looked at her friends and felt a surge of gratitude burn inside her. "We did it! We were able to bring people together," she said with a smile. But the events didn't end there. A few days after the festival, they received an unexpected call from a local TV station. Their performance at the festival made a big impression, and they wanted to make a documentary about their movement. This offer was a real gift and a chance to convey your ideas to a wide audience. Mia and her team realized that this is an opportunity to change the lives of many people. "We have to take it upon ourselves and tell our story," exclaimed Mia. They started working on creating the script and organizing the filming. The documentary not only drew attention to their movement, but also inspired many people to join their efforts. They have received requests from other activists and groups willing to support their work. Society was beginning to change, and this inspired them to move forward. Mia sensed that something amazing had happened on their path to change. Instead of the disunity they had previously seen, there was now unity around them. Together, they continued to build a world where understanding, respect, and cooperation became core values. After all, with each new step they took, they not only changed society, but also opened up new frontiers of opportunity. Their movement became a symbol of hope and inspiration for many, and it was only the beginning of their amazing journey. After all the challenges and obstacles that Mia and her team have overcome, the moment has come when their efforts have begun to produce results that they could not even dream of. The documentary they made became a real hit. It was shown at several festivals and received positive reviews, generating interest and support in different parts of the country. Soon after, their initiative began to be noticed by large organizations that offered financial assistance and resources to further develop their movement. Mia and her friends felt that their work had been given a new lease of life. They organized a series of seminars and social gatherings that attracted people from different backgrounds. At one of these meetings, when the hall was full of participants, Mia made a speech in which she emphasized the importance of unity and mutual understanding. "We all came here with different stories and experiences, but only together can we create a better world," she said, and the audience burst into applause. After the event, she was approached by Grace, an elderly woman who had previously supported them. "Mia, I want you to know that your work inspired me to start my project for older people to connect them with young people. I want them to be able to share their stories and teach each other," she said with a beaming smile. This was a real sign of success for Mia. She realized that their movement is truly changing the lives of not only those who participate in it, but also those outside of their community. New projects and initiatives began to spring up like mushrooms after a rainstorm. By the time their movement's one-year anniversary arrived, they had organized a grand event in the park that drew thousands of people. There were various performances, workshops and discussions where everyone could share their experiences. The atmosphere was filled with joy and unity. On this day, Mia took the stage, and her heart was filled with happiness. She saw people who would never have met before, now chatting amicably and exchanging ideas. "We were able to create a community where everyone can be heard, where there is respect and understanding," she said, and the crowd responded to her with a storm of applause. Liam came up to her at the end of the event. "You know this is just the beginning, right? We can continue to evolve and grow," he said, his eyes shining with confidence. A few days later, they received an invitation to participate in a national conference on racism and justice. This was not only a recognition of their work, but also an opportunity to present their vision on a larger stage. When Mia and her team arrived at the conference, they were overwhelmed by the number of people who had gathered to discuss important issues. Their performance evoked strong emotions, and many participants approached them to thank them for their inspiration and support. The conference provided them with an opportunity to connect with other activists and organizations, which contributed to the further growth of their movement. They returned home with new ideas and fresh projects that they were going to implement. A few months later, thanks to their efforts and tireless work, Mia and her team were able to bring about significant changes in their city. The authorities have started supporting programs aimed at education and promoting dialogue between different cultures. New initiatives have emerged that have allowed people to share their stories and experiences, as well as work together on common projects. In the end, a few years later, Mia looked back at her journey and couldn't help but smile. She saw their small initiative grow into a powerful movement that fostered positive change. People began to trust each other more and talk openly about their fears and hopes. At a meeting with the team, Mia said, "We started this journey with a dream of a better future, and now we are seeing this dream become a reality. We can really change the world if we work together." And while there were still challenges ahead, they knew that they now had not only strength in their unity, but also incredible support from the community they had built. Mia understood that their movement would live on, inspiring new generations. Happiness and hope filled her heart, and she knew that together they could overcome all that lay ahead. This was not just the end of the story, but the beginning of a new chapter full of opportunities and bright prospects. Dear viewers, it is very important for us to hear your opinion about our story. What do you think about what our heroes went through? Have you ever had any incidents of racism in your life? And how did you deal with them? We appreciate each of your stories and want you to share them in the comments. Your thoughts are really important to us, and we want each of you to know how much we appreciate your support. If you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new stories. We wish you a good day and hope to see your comments.